Look at this massive family tree branching out from Abram, the founding patriarch whose lineage dominates ancient records. But pushing past the prominent kings on these main branches, we find a tiny, isolated offshoot, locked in 1911 BC. Her name is Hagar. Hagar is an obscure Egyptian handmaid, a diplomatic gift from the pharaoh, lived her entire life as property within a foreign household, lacking legal agency. We usually map ancient history through the conquests of powerful men, focusing on sweeping battles and legendary patriarchs. Yet the survival of this specific legendary bloodline actually depends on an enslaved Egyptian woman. By the time we reach this point in the timeline, Abram and Sarai have lived in Canaan for exactly 10 years. Sarai remains barren, and she openly states her belief that the divine has explicitly blocked her from bearing children. This diagram maps ancient Near East power dynamics, offering Sarai a harsh workaround. The master and mistress direct their legacy down into a surrogate, Hagar, to manufacture an heir. Abram complies. This clinical property transfer entirely erases Hagar's individual identity. This transaction reduces a human being to an incubator. Powerful figures facing a crisis use the most vulnerable person in their orbit to solve it, stripping away her humanity in the process. The surrogacy plan succeeds. Hagar conceives, and that pregnancy immediately ruptures the strict top-down power hierarchy of the household. Carrying the master's child elevates Hagar's status, leading her to look down on her barren mistress. Sarai responds exactly how someone with absolute legal authority over another person would, with severe retaliatory abuse. Facing this punishment, Hagar takes her first proactive step in the historical record. She reclaims her agency and flees into the unforgiving desert wilderness. Her situation is impossibly bleak. She is pregnant, entirely alone, and running away from the wealthiest and most powerful family in the region with absolutely nowhere else to go. When powerful people attempt to force destiny and engineer a legacy, they inevitably create collateral damage, and it is always the most vulnerable who are forced to pay the highest price. But Hagar does not die out in the elements. Deep in the desert, she is intercepted by a divine messenger, the angel of the Lord. Notice his first move. He doesn't immediately order her to march back to camp. Instead, he speaks to her, directly acknowledging her deep suffering and validating the affliction she endured at the hands of her owners. The angel tells her to name her unborn son Ishmael, declaring her descendants will multiply exponentially into a massive multitude. He outlines a fiercely independent future, a wild man living in intense conflict, yet maintaining a permanent presence alongside his brethren. Kings and patriarchs typically receive this kind of sweeping, multi-generational promise. Here, divine providence reaches past the throne room directly into the desert margins to grant an epic legacy to a forgotten runaway. Hagar reacts to this encounter by breaking the ancient norms of her time. She doesn't just bow and listen to this divine messenger, she actively speaks back. She actually bestows a name upon the deity. She calls him El Roy, which translates to, "Thou God seest me." She realizes that the same God worshipped by her powerful masters has stopped specifically to look at her. To immortalize this interaction, she marks the exact physical location. She names the desert well Bir Lahai Roy, recording its coordinates between the ancient settlements of Kadesh and Bert. Think about the weight of this. In the entire span of this ancient text up to this point, nobody has done this. The lowest-ranking human in the societal structure becomes the very first person in the narrative to give God a name. Hagar walks back into Abram's camp as a woman carrying a specific divine mandate and a future for her child. The surrogacy is seen through to its end, and Hagar successfully gives birth to her son, Ishmael. This timeline locks the event into history. The text anchors the birth to a precise date, snapping firmly onto the record exactly when Abram is 86 years old. While often read as a minor detour in Abram's story, this chapter establishes that the architecture of this ancient lineage and the very names used for the divine were shaped by an Egyptian handmaid in the desert.